Yeah, it's next. I'll leave the child with progress.
Sure.
And I'll say to you, yeah, well, I didn't decide to adopt this next.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Robert, are you good to take this or want me to proceed?
I can give it a go if you want, but you were doing a great job. So if you're throwing your hand up, I'm more than happy to take it. All right. So we've moved into the adoption of the minutes, which is item 3 on the open session agenda. So can we have a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the agenda or adoption of the minutes, sir?
Joe. Second, Sheila.
Okay, all in favor? Great. Any other pecuniary interest with respect to the open agenda? Not seeing any. Okay, adoption of the agenda, item 5. So resolved that the agenda for the June 21, 2023 EDC board meeting be approved as presented. Need a mover and a seconder.
Gannon, Gerald.
Okay. All in favor of the current agenda, or is there any additions that we would like to make? Not seeing any additions. All in favor? Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
New business and updates. CDC EDC joint venture business plan. Who's going to take this one? Is that you, Rick? Or do you want me to?
I think.
Joe, did you want to give a summary to everybody of your discussions with Dan?
Unless you want to. I have no problem doing that.
Why don't you do it? You've been the one having the discussions. Mine's third hand. So
Thank you. A number of months ago, we had preliminary conversations and discussions with Dan Fria of the CDC as to how we could partner together and do something meaningful with respect to either a startup situation or someone who is in business but just can't get enough capital in order to move forward to expand. As a result of that, we conferred with Rick, and from an administrative perspective, he has his hands full. So we wanted to partner with someone who could take in some information or applications from these individuals. Secondly, that had a significant amount of resources, both directly or available at some point beyond what they have in the bank account. So we opened conversations and discussions with Dan Fria, and Dan Fria looked at the Muskoka region to see what they had done in terms of trying to get people from Southern Ontario to move into the Muskokas. Based upon that information, the executive and the board then decided that we should continue to have those conversations and discussions to see how we could adopt some of the principles and ideas that the Muskoka region used to the Development Corporation and adopt them and adapt them to the Sault Ste. Marie situation. So as of now, we've had some general conversations that would establish a joint venture between CDC and the EDC, whereby we would contribute into a pot. And right now we're talking about potentially $300,000 each into that pot. On an annual basis, we would see applications from entrepreneurs, as I indicated earlier, who are wanting to start their own business or are in business and want to expand, just can't get capital. And at some point, the applications will be looked at by the CDC staff, and then they would score them, determine and make a recommendation with respect to the most viable entities or corporations or individuals to be funded. If in fact there are applications involving matters outside of the expertise, knowledge, or experience of the people at the CDC, they would hire consultants to assess the idea or the business plan that's being presented. We are at the stage now where we've had a discussion, undecided in terms of a lot of things, but how would this work? In other words, once these CDC staff assess the applications, we wanted to have a committee that would represent the CDC and the EDC in deciding which matters deserve funding. And we're talking about a board or committee, not, I don't want to use the word board, a committee that would be represented by 2 people or 3 people from the CDC, or 2 or 3 people from the EDC. So the board is going to be looking for volunteers to go and sit on that committee. The first function of the committee would be to sort of dot the i's, cross the t's, and become a little bit more specific with respect to matters. And Dantry has done a pretty good job of outlining and making notes of the minutes of the meetings that he and conversations that he and I have had together, and also with the Muskoka Director of Development. And just the main part of this, though, is that these are not grants. Money will be advanced to the entrepreneur, which would have some very firm basic requirements. First and foremost, a business has to be within Sault Ste. Marie or very close to the city of Sault Ste. Marie. Number 1. Number 2, if they move the business or they move out of the city of Sault Ste. Marie, they have to repay it. It's also going to be structured depending on the nature of the business by way of a loan. So if we decide to give money to a particular individual or company, say $100,000 each, for a total of $200,000, $100,000 for us and $100,000 from CBC, then we may put strings attached to that we could get paid back. We may or may not want interest on that, at least the loose ideas. And we try to figure out what is best for the entrepreneur and what's best for the community. And also there may be a situation whereby we could have an equity position in that business. 10%, 20%, depending on the valuation basis. But it's not a grant. So it's a loan, and that would be 2 things. Make the people work hard to succeed, first and foremost. Secondly, it would pay back into the EDC funds so that it can sustain itself long term, because we don't have any municipal or provincial funding to advance to parties. Is that a pretty good recap, Robert?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. And I think just a couple things to maybe add to that, Joe, is that we're really not focused on there's lots of options for funding for early stage, like startup type stuff. There's lots of, once you're mature, you've got access to market funding. It's really that next phase after the startup where they're trying to scale and they're having a difficult time because they don't have a strong balance sheet at that point. And so we're trying to support there to allow them to scale. And so likely, I mean, if we gave them a traditional loan, it would hurt the balance sheet. It wouldn't allow them to borrow. It would probably constrict. So I think we'd be looking for, potential equity or preferred shares or that sort of thing to try to make it work. But that's part of what the committee is going to come up with. And then those recommendations in terms of reference are going to come back to this board for approval before anything proceeds. So this was really just a heads up as to where things are going and what the next steps look like. So I think, Joe, we have a meeting next week, right, to try to firm up some of those possible details. And then I think we come back to this board in September at the next meeting to finalize any of the terms of reference and stuff. Okay. Any questions, concerns, thoughts on the joint venture with the CDC on this one?
Would it be specific to any area that and you see everything that's developed in the city that we've got fulfilling for some of our expenditures. Is there any specific area of tourism, or is there any area we really want to focus the efforts?
There is no idea to limit the nature of the business venture that is going to be applied. In other words, it doesn't have to be technology, it doesn't have to be farming, whatever party that wants to apply is involved in, it would be looked at on its own merits. Is that fair, Robert?
Yeah, I think the overriding goal is to try to provide some dev activity to support some job creation. And so if that's the foundation for it, then that's sort of where we're coming from. So I don't think it had to be limited to tourism, didn't have to be limited to IT, as Joe mentioned. But I think certainly this board could give the members on that committee, you know, here's some priorities that we'd like to see addressed, but we may not want to specifically limit it. Okay, so any other questions on this one? Not seeing any. Okay, so this is a sort of a hopefully a fun homework assignment, but the this board season is now ending. We've now had the annual general meeting. We've seen the financials, and so really the next board season really kicks off with our meeting in September. So one of the things I was hoping that we could talk about in September, which was what goals do we have for this board for next year? What are we hoping to accomplish? What would constitute success? And so if you can put some thought to this one over the next couple months, you know, maybe spend a couple minutes when you're at the cottage looking at or putting some thoughts to the EDC. But if you could think about some things that you think would assist the community, that would help move this forward, then I think there's an opportunity here for us to, you know, to start to track and measure how successful we are in hitting those goals. And I think as this board has changed priorities over the last few years, I think one of the things that we've sort of lost there is sort of that North Star in terms of where we're going. And I think getting that back would probably help. So does that seem like a reasonable exercise? Yeah, good. Okay. Next item is the upcoming meetings. So we've got an executive meeting and a board meeting in September, executive meeting in October, and a board meeting and executive meeting in November. So if that works for everybody, everybody's got that, then the next item is the adjournment. So we'll need a mover and a seconder for the adjournment.
Joe and Bill?
Okay, all in favor?